The copper sun of Orelise 9 hung low and hateful above the glass plains, turning the dunes into rivers of light. Captain Sera Loom, Vulpani, tall and lithe, orange fur banded in pale cream along her cheeks and tail, pressed her back to a fractured spire of hex crystal. The haft of her family's foxfire glaive was split down the grain, the power filament inside it flickered like a dying firefly. All around her, the Vulpani spear flight lay still, 30 elite scouts reduced to Sera's lonely breath and the faint tick of cooling armor. Across the shimmering basin, the THRYX advanced, towering six-limbed brutes whose carapaces looked poured from gunmetal. Their leader dragged a gravity maul that cut grooves through glass as if it were wet clay. Little Ember, the leader rasped in broken trade tongue. You burned bright. Now Ash. Sera stood, ears forward, tail steady. Name me Ash when your bones stop rattling. They tightened the circle. She watched, measuring. She could find 3 cuts, maybe 4, before the maul found her ribs. She would make them remember Loom. The sky answered first. A needle of smoke bit through the red light and slammed into the basin with a concussion that turned dunes to shards. Sera hit the glass, rolled, and looked up into a curtain of steam. A craft lay broken open like a seed pod. From its ribs stepped a stranger in dark adaptive armor that moved like water over muscle. The helmet snapped back. Human, smooth peach skin, black hair, eyes the color of old tea and utterly calm. Mind if I cut in? He asked, voice dry, as though requesting a turn at a campfire story. The THRYX leader laughed like bolts shaken in a tin. Another snack. The human slung a weapon, sleek, matte, strange. Name's Jax Calder. Let's make this educational. He moved, and the battlefield learned something new about speed. The first THRYX lunged, Jax slid past, weapon cracking once. The brute folded like a hinge. 2 more pounced. He went low, rolled between them, and the weapon whispered twice. Both pitched forward with holes no Vulpani blast knife could punch. Sera watched, breath caught under her tongue. The THRYX were murder in confined spaces, relentless in the open, but the human flowed around them, never where they reached, always where they couldn't block. Captain, Jax called without looking. Weapon status? Broken. Then eyes up and count opportunities. The leader held orders, the pack spread into a hunting crescent. Jax's stance loosened further, almost lazy. You hunt like wolves, he told them. We hunt like weather. He palmed a bead the size of a pearl and tossed it into their teeth. Smoke boiled, thick as wet stone. Claws ripped fog. In the gray, Sera tracked muzzle flashes like fireflies, each crack of Jax's weapon came paired with a collapsing shadow. When the haze cleared, glass glittered with dark THRYX blood. The leader's little eyes were pebbles of hate. What kind of warrior? It snarled. The kind who reads the room, Jax said, checking a dial. You win with size, you lose to angles. 3 more charged. Jax ran into them, dropped to a knee, let their legs straddle his glide path. 3 close reports. 3 towers fell. 9, he murmured, keeping score like it mattered. The circle broke. THRYX don't retreat, these did. The leader thumped them all, trying to stitch courage back into its pack. Jax drew a flat cylinder from his harness and showed it like a coin trick. Fragmenter, he said conversationally to Sera. Metal rain. They don't like metal rain. The leader tasted the air and made a decision no THRYX chieftain should. It backed away. Not over, it promised. We come with thousands. I'll bring a bigger umbrella, Jax replied. Silence returned, full of cooling pops. Jax trotted to his shattered craft, pried free a calm cradle, and started gutting it for parts. Sera lowered her ruined glaive. What are you? Human, he said. One of the stubborn ones. He kept working. Your people fight with honor. Beautiful, terrifying, predictable. THRYX fight with mass. Ugly and direct. both break against a smarter lever. Honor is the spine of Vulpani war. Spines are for carrying weight. Brains decide where to put it. He brought the comms to life, the display ghosted a weak lattice. I can get a whisper through to my wing. Bad news, Captain, big footprint inbound. 10,000 heat blooms, give or take. Sera's ears flattened despite herself. Our colonies. How many civilians on those arcs? Millions, she said, the word tasting like iron. Right, he answered, fingers flying. Then we don't die here. Or if we do, we sell the receipt at a price they'll remember. He glanced up. 2 friends are nearer than the fleet. 6 hours out. 3 humans against 10,000 THRYX? Sera said. Her tail flicked once. Ridiculous. Jack smiled in a way that was not unkind and not comforting. Ridiculous keeps you alive long enough to become doctrine. Then he did something worse than blasphemy. He taught. He showed her how a crystal spire held stress like a throat holds a note. Tap here, it falls quiet. Tap there, it sings until it shatters its neighbors. He broke down THRYX gate into timing windows. He rebuilt the Foxfire filament with a scavenged focusing coil, turning her family blade into a device that made the glass itself want to cut. This is cheating, Sera said, scandal and off-fighting in her voice. This is winning, Jax corrected, eyes kind now. The THRYX didn't ask your dead for a duel. Sera looked at the ash-white fur clinging to broken helmets. Show me more. Gladly. A double comet stitched the sky, 2 drop capsules bleeding heat and grace. They landed a click off, exhaled parachutes that folded themselves, and opened like flowers. Ayakade, short black hair, a smile like a scalpel, hoisted packs that hummed with unhappy chemistry. Oren Vale. Tall, placid, eyes always slightly distant, cradled a long, elegant rifle whose scopes looked like nested thoughts. Started without us, Aya said, surveying the bodies. Students were restless, Jax replied. We're up against a full choir. Oren angled his scope toward the horizon. 9,000 signatures after the smoke, 2,000 sweeping wide. THRYX doctrines intact. Sera took them in. Calm. Precise. They didn't have the look of heroes, they had the look of text-tightening bolts on catastrophe. How do 3 of you plan to fight an ocean? She asked. Storm math, Aya said, clasping a palm to Sera's forearm in greeting. We don't fight it. We shape it. Oren tapped the scope housing. Pack leaders were arrogance. We remove it from the system, the rest becomes kinetic litter. Jack squeezed Sera's shoulder once. We're going to cut nerves, then whisper nightmares. He turned to the wreck and began manufacturing. Hull became shields. Thruster housings became rail throwers with ugly hearts. A broken sensor mast turned into a line-of-sight repeater that could lie to 100 THRYX helmets at once. Aya danced among crystal pillars, stroking detonators into seams, explaining as she went. Seismic charges. Tiny push, big chorus. Don't think bombs, think arguments we're having with the ground. Sera trailed her, tail keeping balance on glass, ears twitching at every click. The heresy settled in her bones and found space. Oren's voice came soft over a local channel. First contact in 30. A pause. They're cautious. The story we told their scouts is working. Good, Jack said. Caution gets lost in mazes. The THRYX vanguard appeared as heat wavers that resolved into mass. They crept where they once rampaged. Oren's rifle coughed once, a lead hunter folded without drama. He was gone before the pack could triangulate, reappearing a ridge over like a rumor that moved. 2 more soft kills. The crescent shivered, attention raked across horizons that weren't there. Their forward motion bled away into stance and second-guessing. They fear ghosts, Sera said, surprised at the satisfaction ringing her words. Let's give them a haunted house, Aya answered, and tapped a stud on her glove. A column of crystal bloomed outward, each shard a blade. The blast sang, and 3 neighboring pillars answered in sympathetic keys, shattering down a corridor the vanguard had chosen as safety. When the dust fell, it fell heavy. Jax's repeater went live. THRYX helmets beeped comforting lies to their owners. Paths that were blocked looked open, ridges that held snipers looked empty. Packs split, reformed, tripped into their own shadows. Phase 1 complete, Aya said. They know we exist. They don't know where we end. Oren began taking leaders. The big shoulder plates made beacons in his scope. Every time one fell, a half-dozen subordinates looked for orders that didn't come. 13 packs blind, Oren reported. Make it 20. 26. The basin turned labyrinth. The THRYX, bred to press, found themselves channeled into happenstance alleys where numbers did nothing but jam. Jax and Sera moved like the idea of movement, a flicker of orange fur and foxfire arc, a whisper crack and a body-biting glass. Jax taught between breaths. Eyes, joints, nerves, he said, pointing with the barrel. They plate pride, not function. Sera adapted. The rebuilt glaive didn't cleave so much as convince matter to separate. She struck at balance, not bulk, at breath, not bark. This is not war, she panted, cutting through a THRYX elbow that sprouted sparks. This is art direction, Jax said, and sent a fragmenter skittering under a pauldron. Confusion curdled into panic. Without the rhythm of pack calls, THRYX squads fired at reflections and screamed at wind. Some tried to run the maze by memory. Aya rerouted their faith into cul-de-sacs armed with bad surprises. Others huddled, gigantic and suddenly very small. Oren worked horrors with geometry. He didn't just shoot, he arranged deaths. Back of the column first, then the lead, then the leftmost, rightmost, carving the illusion of design into random fear so that what remained would tell itself a worse story. Within minutes, a 50-strong thrust was 5 creatures hugging their own armor, too afraid to step away from one another because distance was where death lived. Psychology check, Jax said. They're ready for the rumor mill. Sera listened to THRYX comms. Oren bled into their headsets. Spirits in the glass, one hissed. The ground hates us. They're not talking about us anymore, Aya murmured. Perfect. The command cluster hid inside a crystal butte carved into a bunker of ugly triangles. Sentries scanned outward with admirable discipline. None of them looked for a Vulpani flickering like heat haze. Jax pressed a smooth pebble into Sera's palm. It hummed like a purr. Personal veil. 20 minutes of lying to machines. Kill their war architect, and this stops being a battle. Sera weighed the pebble, ears flattening as the air trembled with distant detonations. What of honor? Jax held her gaze. Honor is a promise to the living, not a favor to the dead. She activated the veil and vanished from the world's courtesy. Inside the butte, War Chief Carr of the THRYX raged at maps that insisted on being wrong. His armor was a reliquary of victories hammered into plates. 6 arms gestured, then clenched, then trembled. Find them, he hissed. Crush air if it resists. Sera flowed behind him, tail a counterweight, pads whispering over carved glass. Training begged her to challenge, name, rank, clean strike. Jax's lesson sat heavier. She put the foxfire blade where plates made way for ligaments. Carr's leg went from pillar to rope. He crashed to one knee, then the other, bellow hitting the ceiling in a scatter of dust. He rolled, and the veil hiccuped, her outline wavered. Little fox, he rasped. Face me proper. Proper was 3 planets ago, Sera said, voice low. Did you duel the schools you burned? He reached for a weapon, she cut the nerve that taught his hand to listen. He tried to speak, she finished the conversation. Command quiet, she said into Jax's channel, breath measured only after. The architect is chalk. Copy, Oren answered. Collapse accelerating. Pack sun braiding. 2000 still coherent, Aya added. Rest or soup? Outstanding, Jax said, pride across the line like warmth. Xville, we'll make the next part educational. Sera stood over the THRYX relic and felt something rearrange in her chest. She had fought like a Vulpani her whole life, she had just saved her people by breaking the rules she loved. Her ears tipped forward. She could love both the oath and the outcome. They met at the crash site amid a garden of repurposed wreckage. Jax had built a launcher that coughed shrapnel into parabolic arcs. Aya had stitched the remaining spires with microcharges that would turn retreat lines into teaching moments. Orin had cached extra optics along a path only he seemed able to walk twice without getting lost. We don't chase, Jax said, handing Sera a fresh cell for her glaive. We shepherd retreat into a story that spreads faster than fleets. Make them tell each other we're impossible, Aya said, palming a detonator. Make that the doctrine that kills their appetite. Orin glanced through his scope, then smiled his small private smile. They are already writing sermons. The next hours were not a battle so much as a curriculum. THRYX squads that rallied found the ground erasing their formations. Leaders who tried to stand up died in ways that looked intentional. Units that chose flight discovered the maze seemed to prefer panic, routes narrowed, paths forked into mirrors, ridges birthed silhouettes at bad moments. Sera moved with Jax, her orange fur a flicker in heat shimmer, her tail whipping balance as she made the glaive sing in the keys of crystal. Between engagements he taught new heresies, how to make a silhouette taller to bait heavy fire into an empty span, how to plant a shard that would break under a specific weight, how to breathe in a way that made a THRYX aim wrong. Twice, they found survivors, Vulpani civilians who had fled early raids and hidden in glass vents. Aya patched them, Orin mapped a safe exfil corridor, Jax lied to the basin until the corridor was real. Not pretty, he told Sera as they watched a THRYX not dissolve into its own momentum. But pretty stopped being on the table when they stepped on it. By the time the far copper sun kissed the dunes, the basin had become quiet in the unsettling way rooms fall silent after arguments. THRYX dead lay like punctuation marks in a grammar that now made sense. Survivors, those not too proud to live, were leaving in skittering craft that didn't look back. Orin listened to the sky. Intercepted band, they're naming this sector cursed. Advising avoidance. That will travel. Aya wiped dust from her brow with the back of a glove. Fleet's 3 days out. We bought them time with lies, geometry, and broken glass. Sera sat on a chunk of hull that had become a bench under Jax's hands. Her tail curled around her ankles, her ears tracked wind like antennae for ghosts. We saved millions by refusing to be the warriors my grandmother taught me to be. You honored the living, Jax said, settling beside her. That's a cleaner oath than it sounds. Sera breathed in glass and sun and smoke and found it didn't poison her. Teach me all of it, she said. Not just the tricks. The thinking that grows tricks. Aya grinned. We call it ugly doctrine. Call it foxfire, Orin said, surprising himself with the joke. It burned bright enough. They laughed, not the brittle laugh of survivors, but the tired laugh of engineers whose prototype had only exploded in the ways they predicted. Night on Orelise 9 turned the glass into a map of stars underfoot. Jax tuned the repeater to listen for broader war. Aya wrote reports in tidy lines that command would later misunderstand. Orin cleaned a rifle that looked like it should never have gotten dirty. Sera walked the quiet maze, palms brushing pillars that had saved her and killed enemies. Her reflection watched her from 100 facets, ears tall, eyes bright, orange fur haloed with foxfire's faint afterglow. She had carried a family blade into honorable deaths. She had carried an idea into survival. She knelt by a Vulpani helm half buried in glitter. We carried you as far as we could, she told the dead softly. Now we will carry differently. Footsteps approached, Jax, whose stride she could now call by sound without turning. He set a hand, careful, warm, on her pauldron. They stood without speaking, letting the night decide which words needed saying. Finally, the THRYX will come back, Sera said. Then we'll have taught the basin to sing new songs by then, Jax answered. And if not us, the ones who learned from the ones who learned from us. Legacy, Sera murmured. Doctrine, he countered, then amended, both. Above them, satellites with failing batteries blinked their last. In 3 days, ships would arrive to rewrite 1,000 commendations. In a week, the THRYX would test another world's patience and find its glass already tuned to human keys, Vulpani harmonies, and the heresy of thinking harder than the problem. Sera flicked her tail and squared her shoulders. Show me how to make the ground lie again, she said. Jack smiled, almost gentle. Captain Loom, with pleasure. Morning bled copper across the glass. Sera woke to the soft chime of Aya's drones returning from a night survey. They landed like careful beetles, extruding thin wafers of crystal seeded with captured data. Aya snapped one into her bracer and projected a low, translucent map above the sand, ghostly threads marking THRYX retreat corridors, heat halos where wounded clustered, hot coals where engines failed to start. Stragglers in 3 pockets, Aya said. 2 are just lost. 1 stubborn. Stubborn can turn into a rally point, Jax murmured. We don't let stubborn write its own story. Oren scanned the horizons. Radio discipline's non-existent. Their helmets are hosting rumors. Some say the ground eats metal. Others say the sun is a god that hates 6 arms. Sera's ears angled toward the breeze. We built ghosts. Now we decide how long the haunting lasts. Jax nodded approval. We'll do a mercy sweep. Leave food, leave water, leave a way out that feels like choosing. The ones who take it, good, fear travels. The ones who don't, we make sure their last broadcast is an apology to the ones who did. They moved with purpose. Aya's drones blossomed food canisters at the edges of shadowed cul-de-sacs and projected directional illusions, runnels of cool air that appeared to lead toward safety. Oren stung the stubborn pocket, first their runner, then their bravest, then the loudest. The remainder folded, leaving weapons in neat piles as if tidiness could bargain with fate. At midday they found survivors again, Vulpani this time, a family of 6 who had hidden beneath a fallen spire in a cave of glittering triangles. The kits, 2 small bundles of orange and cream with 2 wide eyes, flinched from Jax's smooth human face until Sera knelt and let them touch the warm haft of her reforged glaive. Friend, she said, tapping her chest, then Jax's. Friend. We can't escort, Oren said softly, but we can chart. He drew a line across a sheet of smart paper, folding terrain into a map that S. If you get lost, press twice and drop it. It will scream at the sky for help in the exact voice of a broken weather satellite. Sera watched them depart, tail low. We will need a doctrine for civilians too. Jax glanced sideways at her, pleased. Add it to the book. They returned to the wreck and the little camp it had become. The day ripened toward orange. In the distance, THRYX dropships clawed into the sky like beetles that had decided the ground was cursed after all. Oren listened to their goodbye transmissions, superstition, vows, and, unexpectedly, regret. Some of them didn't want this war, he said. They wanted the old raids, the clean prey. They don't like mirrors. Good, Aya said. We'll build them more. On the 3rd dawn, the human fleet arrived as patient geometry, 7 long-spined cruisers, 21 escort knives, a pair of lumbering repair hulks. They came in a formation that said we are calm because we can afford to be, and their shadow crossed the basin like a lid. The ground comms crackled. Forward element, identify. A clipped voice with sandpaper authority. Calder, Cade, Vale, Jax answered. With local ally Captain Sera Loom of the Vulpani spear flight. Basin secure by soft collapse. A pause. Soft collapse? Enemy force dissolved via command decapitation, terrain manipulation, and distributed rumor warfare, Aya said brightly. Another pause, longer, threaded with distant murmurs. Understood. Fleet Command requests a sitrep at High L Platform C. Bring artifacts of your rumor warfare. They ascended in a shuttle that smelled faintly of disinfectant and hot metal. Sera's ears flattened at the change in pressure, her tail curled around her legs to anchor against the strange lack of ground music. When the hatch opened, ship air hit her, humming, disciplined, a smell like ozone reading a book. Admiral Kirata Koya met them with eyes that undressed problems. Beside him stood Archivist Len, an older woman whose attention made Sera feel categorized and cared for in the same moment. "You extracted victory from a deficit," the Admiral said without preamble. "Explain it as if I have 3 minutes and little patience." Jax did, stacking cause on effect until the room had a shape it didn't mind standing in. Aya supplemented with concise visuals, a crystalline cross-section humming at certain frequencies, a THRYX command web with leaders blinking out like snuffed candles, helmet HUDs overprinted with comforting lies. Oren contributed distances, timings, wind speeds, the bones behind the tricks. Archivist Len lifted a brow at Sera. "And you, Captain Loom, how did it feel to abandon your doctrine?" Sera's ears tipped forward. "Like touching hot iron and learning my fur would grow back." The Admiral's mouth tilted. "Poetic. We'll need less poetry and more reproducibility." He turned to Jax. "Package this into trainable modules. We will call it Foxfire Doctrine," Oren said before he could stop himself, then looked politely at the floor. Len smiled. "Foxfire. Pretty name for ugly math." She tapped her tablet. "We'll need cultural overlays for allied species. Captain Loom, will you assist?" Sera glanced at Jax, who nodded once. "I will. But I want something in return." "Negotiate," the Admiral said, amused. "Evacuation priority for Vulpani colonies. And a seat for Vulpani officers in whatever school you build to teach this doctrine." Kier considered the balance sheet of favors. "Granted. On condition you help us prevent the part where you needed us at all." Sera's tail flicked once. "Agreed." They called it the Oralise Annex, a roving field school built in modules that could lock to the undersides of ships or drop to ground as a camp with edges. Its curriculum had the tone of honest tools and the smell of burned crystal. And it had 4 teachers. Jax taught Angle how to see a herd as a fluid and tap it where the flow was thin, how to make a corridor out of nothing but fear and refracted light, how to move like a rumor gather speed. Aya taught Voice, the art of telling lies that came true because enemies believed them, the discipline of setting explosives like punctuation in a sentence future you would want to read. Her class often started with music, not because she was sentimental but because sound made pillars sing. Oren taught Silence, marksmanship as prediction, the geometry of luck, the wisdom of leaving shots you could make because the third shot would be better if the first 2 didn't exist. Sera taught Heresy, how to hold the oath to the living above the old duels, how to let Foxfire flicker in places that felt wrong until wrong became a road. She taught Vulpani to lower their ears at the right moments, taught humans to read tail language, taught THRYX deserters, there were some now, to trust that not every absence was a trap. Her first class began with a bowl of glass pebbles. "Each pebble is a rule," she said. "We will stack them into a tower you can carry. When it wobbles, we will remove pebbles until it stands again. That becomes doctrine." They trained on a small world named Pythos, whose crust was made of fossilized honeycomb. The hive tunnels sang at certain frequencies, mourned at others. I attuned the ground to a low hum that made recruits' bones argue with their helmets, a teaching discomfort. Oren built a moving range where targets appeared only when wind met cliff at stubborn angles. Jax led night drills where the only light came from Foxfire wands Sera crafted, thin spears that glowed when the air wanted you to stop. Not everyone loved it. A Vulpani officer named Thalen Rusk confronted Sera after a lesson where she had instructed students to strike knees before throats. "This is not how our grandmothers fought," Rusk said, for bristling like pride holding knives. Sera let him see her think. "Our grandmothers didn't have children racing the sky for a ship that might not arrive. They had time to lose beautifully. We do not." He held her eyes a very long time, then bowed once, low enough that his tail brushed his own boots. "I will build new grandmothers," he said softly, and returned to the drills. Across the lanes of war, the THRYX adapted, because predators survive by changing too. The Horde's Archivum, a council of scarred tacticians who wore plates engraved with losses, issued a new brief to the packs. They wired their leaders differently, not one big mind for 10 little fists, but 5 middling minds for 20 fists each. "Kill one," the others snarled louder. They wrapped helmets in mesh that rejected alien radio lullabies and wore ear bones that vibrated commands through cartilage when the air lied. They carried shard maws, grenades that ate crystal resonance and belched silence, turning Aya's singing corridors into dull stone. And they sent mirror claws ahead, unit pairs who never moved the same way twice, who learned to make their panic deliberate. Foxfire met its reflection and found it armed. The first test came on Caladan Verge, a world of basalt steps and ice fog. A Vulpani human cadre, Foxfire taught, faced a Horde spear that split itself into 5 converging questions. Jax watched the dance from a cliff and liked none of the answers. "They learned to lose together," he said. "That's bad for us." Aya grimaced as her charges fizzled against the shard maws. They brought earplugs for the ground. Oren plotted angles and saw nothing clean. Leaders are distributed. No single choir to silence. Sera tasted the fog, letting it dampen the world's teeth on her fur. Then we stepped sideways. Half the doctrine was improvisation anyway. Sera turned Aya's voice from song to scent. Glands and drone bellies released perfume that rode fog better than sound rode stone. Jax turned angle on its side, vertical vectors, drop attacks that made steps into traps once only when you came down. Oren accepted a messy canvas and drew a signature in small strokes, shots that didn't kill but made feet falter on ice just long enough for the next step to miss. They framed the 5-mind spear with problems, fog that smelled like false safety, steps that waited to become slides, shots that arrived like suggestions. The spear slowed, split, began to argue with itself. Sera led a unit through a scent corridor, ears flat, tail like a metronome. The first leader died to a knee cut delivered by a recruit who had once spat at her lesson. The second slipped, the third stumbled into his friend's panic. The last 2 attempted the old solution, mass, and found the mountain uninterested in answers that didn't respect gravity. Caladan held. Foxfire bent. The Horde's new brief got a red stamp that read insufficient. Back in the annex, Sera wrote a new page. Title: When the Ground Won't Sing. Subhead: Teach it to smell. Victory is a kind of noise. After Caladan, the quiet rooms filled with people who wanted to own it. The Vulpani Council of Hearths invited Sera to stand beneath a lattice of bone and light and say words that would be recorded on memory cloth and hung in schools. She chose simple ones. "We did not abandon our ancestors," she said. "We asked them to travel faster." Some hearth mothers objected in voices that were knives wrapped in silk. "We see you making new oaths with strangers," one said, eyes flicking toward the human delegates. Sera's ears stayed forward. "Yes. The fire is bigger now. We cannot carry it in one set of hands." The human admiralty wanted Foxfire bottled. Contracts were written with compartments inside compartments. Some sought to turn the doctrine into proprietary glass, pay to sing. Aya leaked the worst drafts to Archivist Len, who leaked them to the rank and file, who laughed at the idea of selling the sound of the ground back to soldiers bleeding on it. THRYX politics, too, shifted. Rumors spoke of Car's sibling, a strategist who wore no armor and carried a flute carved from an enemy's rib, probably apocryphal, Oren noted. This sibling argued that the Horde had lost the myth, that fear had crossed the field wearing a different face. "We must borrow their lies," the sibling wrote to packs who still bleached blades with pride. "Better, we must tell truer ones." Some THRYX defected under flags made of netting and bone. The annex took them in with rules: no armor, no command, no boasting until they learned to whisper. One named Drex learned fast, his 6 hands gentle on explosives, his voice low when he explained to Vulpani recruits how THRYX read fear. "We look for tails," he admitted, glancing shyly at Sera. "You signal too much with them." Sera taught tail lies, a dance of fake annoyance, borrowed courage, and stillness weaponized into ambiguity. "Make them guess wrong," she said, tail motionless as the horizon. Drex nodded like a student who had found a dovetail joint he wished he had carved years ago. Word came on a night stitched with dry lightning. The THRYX were amassing at Pelagos, an ocean world whose continents were living reefs. Pelagos had no crystal to sing, no honeycomb to whisper through, only water layered in temperatures like secrets. The Horde's goal was plain: burn the reefs to slag and turn the carcass into a staging ground. "Ground's off the table," Aya said, tapping maps that were mostly blue. "We need a medium that carries voice." "Water does that," Oren said. "But badly for the things we like." Jax looked at Sera. "You said doctrine for civilians. Pelagos is full of reef tenders with boats and lungs and courage." Sera's whiskers twitched. "We'll need a choir." Pelagos met them with salt and a horizon that didn't believe in edges. The reef tenders were wiry people with long fingers and a tradition of singing to fish. One elder, Miri of the Shallows, held up a conch whose spiral gleamed with living light. "Our reefs sing," she said. "But you are not ready to hear them." "Teach us," Sera said simply, tail lowering in respect. The choir formed in a lagoon that glowed faintly at night. Reef tenders taught pitch, Aya translated pitch into pressure, Oren measured thermoclines like stairs witches used, Jax built buoys that hummed lies into water at frequencies that made THRYX submersibles report their positions as ancient sea monsters. Sera learned to hold her breath until her ribs sang back, learned to let foxfire glare soften into reef glow the fish accepted. The Horde arrived in barges and bug-like swimmers. They dropped shard maws into reefs, the reefs ignored them the way old things ignore new knives. The choir began. Voices rose. Not pretty, not trained, but true to the water. Buoys answered, vibrating a map into the sea. Currents bent. THRYX sonar bloomed with false walls. A canal appeared where none had been, a canyon hid behind a humming curtain. Packs committed to paths that closed like throats. Oren's rifle sat in a sealed housing with a periscope, his shots became bubbles that arrived as accidents. Aya's charges were jellyfish, soft bags that drifted into prop intakes and transformed into stinging math. Drex, now a student teacher, showed reef tenders how to paint fear on THRYX visor lenses with plankton glow. Sera dubbed with Miri. They swam under a barge whose belly sweated heat. Sera placed her palm on living coral and felt a cord spread like warmth. "Now," Miri mouthed. They sang one low note. The reef responded, polyps contracting, stone flexing in slow-motion patience learned over centuries. The barge hesitated as if remembering something, then grounded itself gently onto knobby teeth. On deck, THRYX scrambled, misunderstanding physics that had just grown a mouth. Jax led skiff teams through newly minted water corridors. "Angle isn't just lines," he shouted over spray. "It's timing meeting affordance." No one had capacity to laugh at doctrine jokes, they were busy surviving them. By afternoon, the Horde's plan was threaded with holes. By night, the barges burned where water allowed, and the swimmers drifted in circles taught to them by lies. At dawn, Pelagos sang back, reefs glowing, fish schooling in spirals that looked like gratitude. Miri handed Sera the conch. "You are ready to hear," she said. Sera pressed it to her ear. Inside, the sea struggled to tell a story in one breath. She heard possibilities, foxfire moving through water, honor wearing a snorkel with dignity, Vulpani kits learning to hold their tails still in boats. "We'll write this down," Sera said when she could breathe. "And we'll teach it until the ones who want to burn have to learn to swim first." Jax clapped her shoulder, soaking wet and grinning despite salt stinging his eyes. On to the next impossible. Oren, wringing out a towel that would never be dry again, added, preferably somewhere with fewer jellyfish. Aya shook bioluminescent droplets from her hair so they fell like a laughing constellation. no promises. Word of Pelagos traveled faster than any fleet. Reef tenders sang their victory to the currents, and the currents carried it to the trader navies, who embroidered it into rumor before the next tide. The Horde's name was whispered with hesitation now, not awe, and maps began marking ghost water where Pelagos lay. Sera, Jax, Aya, and Orin stood on a coral platform as Miri gifted them a small crate of reef pearls. "These are not for wealth," she said, "but for memory. They glow brightest when danger nears. They will remember this battle long after your guns forget." Back aboard the Orelise Annex, the team sifted through battle data. Aya mapped sonar interference patterns that worked best, Orin charted buoy placement that created phantom continents, and Jax highlighted moments where intuition had beaten calculation. Sera walked among their students. Some wore Vulpani armor with tails swishing proudly, others were human cadets with grease on their cheeks, and now there were THRYX deserters too, heavily monitored, yet eager to learn. Drex, the six-armed demolition savant, hunched over a holographic reef, explaining to two recruits how coral's growth pattern could redirect torpedoes. "You think of the sea as flat," he said, voice a low rumble. "But the water sings like crystal, and we just changed the song." Foxfire doctrine was no longer an experiment. It was becoming a movement. But not everyone was pleased. Fleet Command sent a curt message: centralization of Foxfire assets required. Training must be standardized and controlled. Reports of unconventional spiritual tactics with civilians causing confusion among naval officers. Aya scowled. Translation: they don't like that we won battles with fish songs. They don't like that they can't put ghosts in a spreadsheet, Jax said, smirking. Sera folded her arms, her tail lashing once. Let them come audit. They'll leave with homework. But the Horde wasn't auditing. They were listening. The attack came at dawn, quiet as frost. A THRYX strike group, not a Horde spear but a scalpel, slipped past fleet pickets using sensor ghosts stolen from Foxfire itself. Aya's alarms shrieked too late. By then, drop pods were already cutting through atmosphere like obsidian knives. "Move!" Jax barked, dragging a recruit from her hammock as the annex shuddered under impact. The modular base folded into defense mode, bulkheads sliding like puzzle pieces. Orin was already on a catwalk, rifle whispering before boots hit the ground. Sera ignited her glaive and met the first intruder in a hallway of flickering lights. He was THRYX, leaner than the brutes she knew, moving with predator economy. Their blades clashed in a hiss of orange sparks, tail and extra arms flicking in a deadly rhythm. He grinned through mandibles. "You teach well," he rasped. "We learned better." Sera parried, tail counterbalancing as she spun low. "Not well enough." She swept his legs, striking joints instead of armor, and his body folded. In the comm hub, Aya was hacking their own security grid, rerouting corridors. "They're using our doctrine against us. They know where the dead ends are." "Then change the maze," Jax said, tossing her a coil of det cord. Orin's voice came cool over comms. "For squads inbound on Module Delta. They're not killing, they're searching." "For what?" Sera asked, slicing another attacker's spear mid-swing. "The database," Jax realized grimly. "They want our lessons." Aya cursed in 3 languages. "They're trying to steal Foxfire." The annex became a battlefield of mirrors. Sera and Jax fought side by side, blades and gunfire weaving a rhythm so seamless it felt like a dance. Drex led a small demolition team, his 4 upper arms holding grenades while his lower pair carried a scavenged human carbine. "You wanted THRYX to learn from you," he growled over comms. "Now they're quoting our notes back at us." Aya used their tricks against them, hallways filled with false doors, decoy life sign beacons, traps designed to collapse floors beneath squads. "You want Foxfire? Here's the express course," she shouted as a detonation threw 2 attackers into a bulkhead. But the real fight was at the data core. Orin crouched in a sniper's nest overlooking the sealed vault, breath measured, eyes calm. 5 seconds, he murmured. The first infiltrator appeared at the vault door, cloaked in adaptive armor. One shot, one corpse. Then two. Then three. The fourth dodged and fired back. Orin rolled, let the bullet sing past his ear, and answered with a shot through event reflection. Sera arrived in a blur, glaive igniting like dawn breaking in the dark. Status? Vault intact, Orin said, reloading. For now. More attackers poured in. They were over a railing to land in the center of the fight. The annex wasn't designed for a siege, it was a classroom. But classrooms can be deadly when the teachers have imagination. Aya rewired the training simulators, turning corridors into holographic killing fields. Recruits fought shoulder to shoulder with their instructors, some dying in the same halls where they'd learned their first lesson. Sera met a THRYX captain at the core chamber doors. He was taller than most, his armor engraved with foreign script. He carried no gun, only a staff tipped with a vibroblade. Your doctrine is beautiful, he said in flawless trade tongue. We will use it to end you. Sera's tail bristled. Try. They clashed, his staff whirling like a storm. Sera parried, feinted, and struck low, but he was fast, too fast. You're good, he said, blocking her next thrust. I had good teachers, she answered, spinning to slash his leg. The captain caught her strike with the butt of his staff, twisting. Pain lanced up her arm. She hissed, ears flat, and drove her knee into his midsection, sending him staggering. Foxfire isn't just tricks, she growled. It's choice. She snapped her glaive forward, impaling him through the throat. The raid lasted 3 hours. By dawn, the annex smoked under a rising sun, parts of it shattered, corridors littered with fallen bodies. Foxfire survived, but barely. Jax limped through the wreckage, face streaked with grime. Aya leaned against a wall, bruised and furious. They almost took it, she said. But they didn't, Jax replied. Orin sat on a crate, methodically cleaning his rifle. They've studied us. The Horde won't attack like brutes anymore. They already didn't, Sera said softly, tail curling around her boots. She stared at the bodies of trainees, some Vulpani, some human, even a few THRYX defectors. Her claws flexed against her palms. They wanted our doctrine. They bled for it. And now they'll come back with it sharpened. Aya kicked a shattered panel. We just made them better. Jack shook his head. We made everyone better. The question is who learns faster. Sera stood, her silhouette framed by sunlight streaming through a broken wall. Then we teach faster. Harder. We don't just train soldiers. We make teachers. Aya looked up, surprised. We go home, Sera said. To the hearths. We convince my people to abandon pride and embrace Foxfire completely. If we fail, this doctrine dies with us. Let's pack, Jack said. The Vulpani homeworld of Lythus Prime was a tapestry of forests stitched with silver rivers, each canopy shimmering under moons that felt too gentle for a galaxy at war. The capital city, Varen Hearth, sat on a plateau where crystal towers spiraled like frozen fire. Sera hadn't seen it since before the fall of their colonies. Her paws itched to feel the mossy soil, but her heart was heavier than her armor. The Council of Hearths had summoned her. Not as a decorated officer, but as a challenge to tradition. Inside the grand hall, sunlight streamed through slanted glass, painting patterns over the council circle. Each hearth mother sat on a raised dais, tails coiled, ears erect, their presence a wall of history. Sera bowed low, but she didn't lower her gaze. Honored mothers, she began. I come with a doctrine that saved thousands of lives. It can save more. A ripple of disapproval moved through the chamber. One counselor, Mother Tira, spoke first, her fur snow-white, her eyes sharp. We have heard of your methods. Deception. Sabotage. Turning the sacred battlefields into traps. Is this what you call honor? It is what I call survival, Sera replied, voice calm but carrying steel. Our old ways died the day the Horde set fire to the crystal plains of Valera. Foxfire doctrine gives us a future. Another, Mother Isin, flicked her tail dismissively. You bring humans into our sacred defense. Outsiders. Their methods are brutal. Jack stepped forward from Sera's side. He wore his armor but left his weapons holstered, a silent show of respect. Brutal doesn't mean dishonorable, he said evenly. It means we respect life enough to do what's necessary to protect it. Murmurs spread. Tira's ears flattened. And who are you to speak of honor in this hall? Jax's jaw tightened, but Sera placed a paw on his forearm. The contact was brief, but enough to ground them both. He is the man who saved my life, she said. And who helped me save yours, even if you don't yet see it. A younger counselor leaned forward, her amber eyes bright with curiosity rather than scorn. Mother Kiva, one of the few hearth mothers who had been a warrior herself. Show us, she said. The hall quieted. The courtyard of the Grand Hall had seen duels for centuries. Its polished obsidian floor reflected banners of every clan, each one embroidered with victories won through honorable combat. Today, that floor would see something else entirely. Aya crouched over a network of small drones, calibrating them while Orin mounted observation nodes on the surrounding pillars. Drex, the THRYX defector, stood silently behind Sera, a living reminder that old enemies were now students. Jack stepped beside Sera. They're expecting fireworks, he murmured. Give them math instead. Sera's ears flicked in amusement. Foxfire is both. Mother Tira had insisted on the demonstration being live combat. She'd assembled a squad of elite Vulpani guards, swift, disciplined, and lethal in close quarters. They entered the courtyard with spears glowing in anticipation, tails steady as steel rods. Sera activated her glaive, its foxfire blade humming softly. We're not here to shame them, she whispered to Jax. No, Jax said, eyes scanning the guards. We're here to scare them enough to think differently. The guards attacked as one, a blur of orange fur and blue energy arcs. Sera dodged the first strike, rolling beneath a sweeping spear and striking the ground instead of her opponent. The floor sang, a low, resonant hum that caused every Vulpani's ears to twitch. Aya triggered the first sequence. Hidden drones projected illusions of Sera across the courtyard. To the guards, it appeared as if 5 Sera looms fought in perfect unison. Gasps rippled from the council's balcony. The guards tried to regroup, but Orin fired a blank shot that ricocheted off the polished floor, creating a sonic echo. The echo disoriented them just enough for Sera to sweep her glaive through a guard's legs, sending him sprawling. Stop watching the fight, Aya's voice came over the comms, projected through hidden speakers. Watch the timing. The second phase activated. As a guard lunged forward, a smoke burst went off at his feet, triggered by his own momentum. He froze, confused, as his spear tip struck nothing but air. Within minutes, the elite squad was surrounded. Not by fighters, but by perception traps. They looked at each other, lost in a battlefield that didn't exist 10 minutes ago. When Sera finally called for a halt, the guards knelt, panting, their tails tucked in embarrassment. Sera turned to the council. That was Foxfire, she said. No lives lost. No wasted energy. We can fight 10 times our number and win. Or make them run without a fight at all. Even Tira was silent. After the demonstration, the council chamber was no longer filled with contempt, only debate. They dishonor our traditions, Tira snapped, her voice sharp as a spear point. We are not predators who slink in shadows. We are prey if we don't, Kiva countered, her tail lashing. I saw my own guards beaten without a drop of blood spilled. If Foxfire works, we'd be fools to ignore it. Mother Isin spoke next, softer but no less firm. The Horde studies us as we speak. They will come with more cunning next time. I do not like this doctrine, but I like extinction less. Sera stepped forward, tail raised. Foxfire isn't dishonor. It's evolution. We carry our ancestors' fire into the future, not let it burn us alive because we refuse to change. The council argued for hours, voices rising and falling like tides. At last, Mother Kiva raised a paw for silence. I call for a vote. The decision came by slim margin. Foxfire would become a formal doctrine of the Vulpani Defense Forces. Joint brigades with humans would be established. The Hearths would sponsor training schools alongside the Oralise Annex. Tira stormed out without a word. After the session, Sera leaned against a balcony rail, ears drooping in exhaustion. Jax joined her, leaning casually beside her. You won, he said. We all did, she murmured. Her tail flicked, brushing lightly against his boot. She froze, embarrassed, but Jax only smiled. You're allowed to celebrate, Captain. She gave him a side glance, her amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. And you're allowed to stop being so infuriatingly calm. He chuckled. Not in my contract. They stood in silence for a while, the scent of night-blooming flowers drifting through the balcony. For a brief moment, Sera let herself relax. Their next deployment came faster than expected. The Horde struck Nerith Prime, a megacity world built on layers of metal and glass. No forests, no crystal plains, no coral reefs, just endless skyscrapers and sprawling streets. Foxfire had always relied on terrain, here, there was none. Perfect, Jax muttered, studying the city's schematics aboard their dropship. We finally get to see if Foxfire works in a place where the ground won't help us. Aya was already sketching plans on her tablet. We make terrain. Elevators, light patterns, traffic systems, if it moves or blinks, I can weaponize it. Oren leaned back, calm as always. Sniping in a city's like playing chess with ghosts. I'll enjoy this. Sera, however, felt uneasy. Her tail flicked nervously as she studied the satellite feeds. The Horde wasn't just invading, they were occupying block by block, embedding themselves in buildings like ticks. Civilians were trapped in high-rises, and the city's police force had already been wiped out. This isn't a battlefield, she said. It's a prison. Then let's break it, Jax replied. The dropship cut through Nerith's polluted clouds, heading for a rooftop insertion point. Sera stood near the open ramp, her fur whipped by cold wind, glaive humming softly. Jax stood behind her, watching the skyline. You're worried, he said. I'm calculating, she replied, ears twitching. You always calculate with your ears? She shot him a look, amused despite herself. Do humans always talk this much before a fight? Only when we're scared, he admitted, smiling faintly. She blinked at him, surprised by his honesty. Are you scared? Terrified, he said. But I like my odds. You're here. Her fur flushed warm under her armor, and she quickly turned away. Landing in 30 seconds, Aya called. The city awaited them. The dropship touched down on the skeleton of a half-built skyscraper. Wind howled through exposed girders, scattering rain across neon-lit glass below. Nerith Prime pulsed with electric life, but entire districts glowed dark, a sign the Horde had rooted in deep. Urban terrain, Aya muttered, crouched over her wrist pad. Millions of moving parts, no singing ground, no choral allies. Just steel, light, and verticality. I like it. Oren swept a sniper scope across the skyline. Sightlines are fractured. Perfect hunting ground for both sides. Sera crouched at the roof's edge, tail flicking as she studied the chaos below. THRYX patrols moved like armored beetles along streets slick with rain, their carapaces reflecting flashing billboards. Civilians huddled behind barricaded windows, glowing faintly in Oren's infrared feed. This is worse than I thought, Sera said. They're digging in, using civilians as shields. Jax knelt beside her, rain streaking his hair. Then we take away their comfort. Let's see how Foxfire performs when the world itself doesn't want to cooperate. Aya smiled grimly. I'll make the city sing. Within 30 minutes, Aya had hijacked Nerith's grid. Traffic lights blinked in deliberate patterns, guiding Horde patrols into choke points. Holographic billboards glitched to display decoy heat signatures. Elevators stalled mid-floor, trapping squads in glass coffins. "They're good at adapting," Aya said, fingers flying over her wrist pad. "Let's make them overthink everything." Warren had taken position in an abandoned penthouse, scope scanning 3 blocks. "First kill," he whispered as a THRYX officer dropped. "They're not panicking yet. Give me 10 minutes. Sera led a team of mixed Vulpani and human soldiers through rain-slick alleys, her glaive's foxfire blade dimmed to avoid attention. She signaled silently, ears swiveling to track every metallic scrape. 2 patrols ahead, she murmured into comms. Jax's voice came back, calm and certain. "Ambush them. Let the civilians see us win clean." They waited until a passing mag truck drowned the sound of their approach. Sera struck first, slicing through a THRYX's knee joint with surgical precision. The squad crumpled before they realized they were surrounded. No shots fired. No screams. Only silence. "Clear," she said. Civilians peeked through a shattered window as Jax waved them to stay back. "Help's coming," he mouthed. Their eyes followed Sera, glowing faintly with hope. By nightfall, the Horde shifted tactics. Instead of patrols, they moved in coordinated waves, their formations tighter, sharper, less predictable. "This isn't random," Oren said over comms. "There's a brain behind this." Jax was crouched on a rooftop across from him, rain dripping off his armor. "You're saying command's local?" "Very." Aya patched in a feed she'd hacked from a THRYX helmet. A distorted figure appeared on the display, a tall THRYX with a lean frame, mandibles etched with runes, and piercing violet eyes. Unlike the brutish warlords they'd fought before, this one wore no heavy armor, only a flowing mantle of dark mesh. "That's Vera, Car sibling," Drek said, voice low. "The strategist who taught the Horde to stop charging blindly. If they're here, this city's a proving ground." Sera narrowed her eyes. "Then we take the board away from them." Vera's forces moved like chess pieces. Drone swarms patrolled rooftops, armored squads locked down intersections, and sniper nests forced Foxfire operatives into alleys. Aya cursed softly. "They're countering us in real time. They're predicting where we'll be before we get there." "Then we stop being predictable," Jax said. "Oren, shift patterns every 30 seconds. Aya, give them a ghost to chase." Moments later, THRYX drones locked onto what appeared to be a squad of humans sprinting across a plaza. Vera's voice cut across intercepted comms, "Corner them." The squad turned out to be decoy projections. When the THRYX converged, the plaza erupted, Aya's microcharges detonated, flipping armored vehicles onto their sides. Sera led her team out of the shadows, her glaive cutting through drone swarms like a streak of fire. Vera, watching from a control center, tilted their head slightly. "Interesting." Hours into the battle, rain turned the city into a mirror of neon and chaos. Sera and Jax pushed deep into enemy territory, aiming to locate Vera's command hub. Warren and Aya held the perimeter, guiding them through collapsing buildings and sniper corridors. Finally, they found it, a repurposed communications tower. Vera was waiting. The strategist stood in the center of the rooftop, unarmed but poised. "You're the fox," they said, voice smooth. "And you're the ghost," they added, glancing at Jax. Sera raised her glaive. "Surrender. This city isn't yours." Vera smiled, a chilling, knowing gesture. "You've made war beautiful. Let me return the favor." They moved faster than any THRYX Sera had fought. Dual blades flashed from beneath Vera's cloak, humming with energy. Jax fired twice, Vera deflected the rounds mid-motion, sparks scattering like raindrops. Sera lunged, tail snapping for balance as she struck low. Vera spun, sidestepping with inhuman grace, countering with a strike that nearly split her armor. Jax dropped his rifle, switching to a combat knife, moving in tandem with Sera. They fought in a storm of steel and neon light. Sera was not just a warrior, they were an artist of violence, every strike calculated to corner and confuse. Back! Jack shouted as Sera fainted, forcing Sera toward the ledge. She ducked under the strike, twisting, her glaive slicing upward to catch Sera across the chest. A shallow wound, but enough to make the strategist stumble. "You fight with heart," Sera said, blood sizzling on rain-slick steel. "That's your weakness." "Or our strength," Jax growled, grabbing Sera's arm and pulling her out of range. The rooftop became a death trap. THRYX reinforcements swarmed the tower. Aya screamed over comms, "I can't hold the perimeter." "Get out." Sera and Jax fought side by side, their movements seamless now, glaive strikes and gunfire complementing each other in a deadly rhythm. Sera danced between them, cutting and retreating, drawing them deeper into chaos. A blade caught Sera's shoulder, burning through her armor. She hissed in pain, staggering. Jax immediately stepped between her and Sera, blocking a killing blow with his forearm guard. Sparks rained as he shoved Sera back. "Go!" Jax yelled. "I'm not leaving you," she snarled. Sera's eyes glimmered with interest. "So much loyalty," they mused. "Shame it won't save you." Before they could strike again, a thunderous blast shook the rooftop, Orin's sniper round, loaded with a microcharge, tore through Sera's blade. The strategist recoiled, cloak flaring as they retreated into smoke grenades. "Extraction point," Aya ordered. "Now." Jax grabbed Sera, half carrying her as they leapt from the tower onto a drone-assisted glide line. Sera's laughter echoed behind them, soft and mocking. Back at their safe house, Sera sat on a crate as Aya patched her shoulder wound. Her fur was matted with blood, her tail curled protectively around her legs. Jack stood nearby, silent but watchful, his hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline had faded. "They were incredible," Sera admitted. "Sera fights like they've studied us for years." "They probably have," Jack said. "Every battle we've won?" "They were learning." Aya swore softly, slamming her tools shut. "We almost died tonight. Foxfire's not untouchable anymore." Sera looked up at Jax. "We need to change. Again." He crouched in front of her, placing a hand gently on her knee. "We will. You've already changed everything once." Her ears flicked at the closeness, her amber eyes softening. "You always sound so certain." He smiled faintly. "Because I have to be." Orin's voice cut through the moment. "They're pulling back. Sera doesn't want to lose the city. That means they're planning something bigger." Sera stood, wincing at her wound. "Then we'll be ready. We'll make Foxfire something even they can't predict." Jax gave her a small nod. "We'll write a new chapter. And make them fear the fox again," she added, her tail lashing with renewed determination. News of the Nerith Prime battle spread quickly. Foxfire Brigade had saved the city, but whispers followed, rumors planted carefully, like seeds meant to rot. "They say the fox fights without honor," a civilian broadcast murmured. "That hooray." Wrist pad onto a table. "They're trying to turn public opinion against us." "They're good," Jack said quietly, leaning over her shoulder. "They're not just making us feared. They're making us hated." Sera stood near the viewport, watching the glow of Nerith's cityscape below. Her tail twitched, ears low. "My own people whisper that I've broken our traditions. Some call me a heretic. Does it matter?" Aya asked bluntly. "You're saving lives." "It matters," Sera said softly. "Vulpani history is built on honor. If I lose that, I lose their trust. Without trust, Foxfire is just tricks." Jax approached, resting a hand on her armored shoulder. "You haven't lost anything. You've evolved. And you've given them something stronger than honor, survival." She turned her amber gaze on him. "And if survival costs my soul?" Jax met her eyes evenly. Then I'll carry some of the weight. Aya coughed theatrically. Touching. But we've got a problem. Vera's learning faster than we are. The next months turned into a chess match between Foxfire and Vera. Vera abandoned brute force raids. Instead, they planted operatives inside cities months in advance, setting up surveillance networks and propaganda hubs. Civilians vanished. Streets became paranoid corridors. Aya slammed another datapad onto the table. They're weaponizing fear. No explosions. No open war. Just whispers, curfews, disappearances. They're turning cities into quiet prisons, Oren said, scrolling through intercepted feeds. No visible enemies to shoot. Sera's tail lashed. So we fight shadows with shadows. Exactly, Jack said. We turn their cities into labyrinths. Not battlefields, puzzles. They want control? Let's make control impossible. Foxfire evolved again. Drones projected phantom patrols to confuse THRYX scouts. Building systems, elevators, sprinklers, holographic signage, were hacked into misleading enemies. Civilians were trained to participate. Shifting furniture to create choke points, sending coded messages in graffiti, turning alleys into death traps. The first test came on Veyron Station, a sprawling orbital hub the Horde had spent months fortifying. By the time Vera arrived to inspect, their own troops were lost in a maze of flickering lights, looping corridors, and false emergency alarms. Phase 3 complete, Aya whispered over comms as a squad of confused THRYX stumbled into an ambush they thought was an evacuation route. Not a single shot fired by civilians, Oren noted, calm pride in his voice. Sera stood at the heart of the station's central atrium, her glaive glowing softly as civilians huddled around her. They wanted to own this place, she said, voice carrying through the intercom. Now it's ours again. Cheers echoed through the labyrinth. The next day, every screen on Veyron Station flickered. Vera's face appeared, calm, elegant, terrifying. You're clever, little fox, they said, their voice echoing in every hallway. You've learned to make fear your ally. So have I. The screens shifted. Images of burned villages. Civilians executed in retaliation. This is the cost of your heresy, Vera continued. For every trap you set, for every whisper you twist, the Horde will answer tenfold. Aya cursed, slamming her fist against the console. They're turning our victory into their propaganda. Sera stood frozen, claws digging into her palms. She could smell the fear ripple through the civilians. Her ears flattened as memories of Valera's burning crystal plains flashed in her mind. This is psychological warfare, Jack said grimly. They're forcing you to question yourself. They're forcing everyone to question me, Sera murmured. Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then let them. Questioning isn't weakness. It means you're doing something new. Something that scares them. She looked at him, searching for doubt in his steady brown eyes, but found none. You always know what to say, she whispered. Not always, he admitted softly. Just when it matters most. Their moment was broken by Oren's calm tone. They've marked us. The Horde will retaliate within days. Sera straightened, tail snapping like a whip. Then let's give them a retaliation they won't forget. That night, the Foxfire Brigade rested in an abandoned hotel turned safe house. The rain outside beat against cracked windows, a soft rhythm that made the silence heavier. Sera sat by a dim lantern, her glaive disassembled in her lap. Her hands moved on instinct, but her mind spiraled. She remembered her grandmother's words about honor, the old training duels, the stories of noble warriors who stood against impossible odds and fell beautifully. Foxfire wasn't beautiful. It was effective. And effective was winning. But at what cost? She didn't hear Jack's approach until he crouched beside her. You're running yourself into the ground, he said gently. I'm fine, she murmured, not looking at him. You're bleeding, he said, pointing to a scratch on her cheek she hadn't noticed. She finally glanced at him. You always notice everything. He smiled faintly. Occupational hazard. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension between them wasn't the battlefield kind. It was softer. Dangerous in a different way. I'm afraid, she admitted finally. Jax tilted his head. Of Vera? No, she whispered. Of myself. Of what I'm becoming. He reached out, gently taking her hand. You're becoming someone who wins wars so kids don't have to fight them. That's not something to fear. Her ears flicked, and for the first time in weeks, she leaned into him, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. Thank you, she said quietly. Jax exhaled slowly, his hand resting lightly against her back. Always. 2 weeks later, intel came through. Vera had fortified Arixa, a barren desert moon with sprawling underground caverns. Reports suggested the strategist was there personally, turning the moon into a massive kill box. They're daring us, Aya said, projecting satellite images of massive tunnels lit with eerie blue light. Every entrance is fortified. Every exit is a choke point. They want us to come, Oren said flatly. Which means we should, Jax replied. Sera studied the map, tail twitching thoughtfully. Arixa is a trap, she said. But it's also a chance. If we take out Vera, the Horde loses their brain. And if we fail, Aya added, the galaxy learns Foxfire isn't invincible. Silence fell. Everyone looked to Sera. Finally, she said, we go. We turn their trap into our weapon. We make Arixa their grave. Jax's lips curved into a faint smile. Now that sounds like the fox I know. Sera looked at him and smirked despite herself. Then let's hunt. Arixa looked dead from orbit. A scarred desert moon with dust storms swirling like pale ghosts. But beneath its surface, life pulsed. THRYX engineers had carved a labyrinth of tunnels, turning the moon into a fortress meant to kill Foxfire itself. Aya flicked through sensor feeds aboard their dropship. They'd built countermeasures for every trick we've used. Sound dampeners. Fake heat signatures. Even holographic Foxfire ghosts of their own. They're daring us to play our own game, Oren murmured. Sera stood at the viewport, her reflection ghosting over the barren surface. Her tail twitched once, slow and deliberate. Then we won't play our game. We'll write a new one. Jax strapped his rifle across his back, stepping beside her. You know this is a trap. She glanced at him, her amber eyes steady. That's why we'll win. They expect us to flinch. We won't. Jax gave her a half-smile. Reckless. I like it. They landed under cover of a dust storm, Foxfire operatives spilling from the dropship like whispers. The entrance tunnels loomed ahead, massive stone arches lit by eerie blue lamps. The air reeked of ozone and dust. Aya whispered into comms, jamming field active. Comms will be short range. Stick close. Sera led the team, her Foxfire glaive dimmed to a faint ember. Her orange fur caught glints of blue light, making her look like a moving flame. The tunnels were too quiet. No guards. No alarms. Just the hum of machines buried deep. This feels wrong, Oren murmured, his sniper rifle cradled. Because it is, Jax replied, scanning every shadow. A flicker of movement. Sera raised a hand. Hold. A single THRYX drone hovered ahead, projecting a hologram of Vera. Welcome, Fox, the strategist's voice purred, echoing through the tunnels. We built this place for you. Every sound you make will betray you. Every shadow you trust will kill you. The hologram vanished. Subtle, Aya muttered. Stay sharp, Sera ordered. The first attack came fast. A section of the tunnel walls slid open, revealing mounted plasma cannons that fired without warning. The team dove for cover, sparks spraying against the stone. Automated defenses, Aya snapped, pulling out a control pad. Give me 30 seconds. You have 10, Jack said, firing precise bursts to buy her time. Sera vaulted over rubble, her glaive slicing through a cannon's barrel. She moved like a streak of orange light, tail whipping for balance. The glow of her blade reflected in the dust-choked air, casting dancing shadows. Aya grinned as she cracked the system. Cannons offline. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. This is just the start, Oren said quietly, scanning the tunnels ahead. The deeper they went, the more Arixa fought back. Floors shifted unexpectedly, dropping operatives into pits filled with stun gas. Entire corridors rotated, disorienting squads. Holograms of Foxfire operatives flickered to life, forcing soldiers to second-guess every target. This isn't a base, Aya muttered as she worked furiously on her pad. It's a puzzle box. Dare is trying to break our rhythm, Jack said, covering her. Force us to waste time, waste trust. Sera knelt by a fallen operative, helping him up. Her ears twitched, picking up subtle vibrations in the walls. This place hums wrong, she whispered. Wrong how? Jax asked. Like a predator's breathing. A rumble echoed through the tunnels, followed by the heavy stomp of approaching THRYX squads. They're hurting us, Oren said, voice calm but tight. Then we turn the herd, Sera replied, standing tall. Her tail flicked once in a sharp signal. Foxfire, shift pattern. Follow me. Sera led them into a narrow corridor where the humming grew louder. She struck the wall with her glaive, sending a ripple through the stone. A second later, the ceiling groaned and collapsed behind them, blocking the THRYX advance. Aya's eyes lit up. You're using their own resonance network against them. Sera nodded. They built a labyrinth. We'll teach it who owns it. For hours, the brigade fought through the maze, flipping traps, baiting enemies into choke points, and using every lesson Foxfire had ever taught them. Aya rerouted power grids to plunge corridors into darkness. Oren picked off squad leaders with surgical precision, using reflections in polished stone. Jax moved like a ghost, his rifle barking in controlled bursts, while Sera was a blaze of movement, every strike precise, every step deliberate. They weren't surviving the labyrinth, they were rewriting it. But Vera was always one step ahead. They finally reached the central chamber, a massive cavern lit by glowing stalactites, cables strung like spiderwebs across the ceiling. At the center, Vera stood, unarmored but deadly, their dual blades humming softly. Impressive, Vera said, voice calm. You've turned my masterpiece into a playground. But even foxes tire. Sera stepped forward, glaive igniting. You built a trap to kill us. I'm here to end this war. Vera tilted their head. End it? Or rewrite it? They lunged, faster than before. Sera barely blocked the first strike, sparks flying as their weapons clashed. Jax fired, but Vera's movements were impossible to predict. They spun, kicking the rifle from his hands and forcing him back. The duel began. Vera was all precision, every step calculated, every strike meant to corner. Sera was instinct and adaptation, her tail a counterweight, her body a blur. You fight beautifully, Vera said mid-strike, their blades flashing. Sera snarled, dodging a lethal thrust. I don't fight for beauty. Vera smiled faintly. Pity. They clashed again, the cavern ringing with steel. Sera spun, using the staff end of her glaive to sweep Vera's legs, but the strategist flipped midair, landing in a crouch. Jax rejoined the fight, blade drawn, moving in perfect sync with Sera. Together, they drove Vera back step by step. But Vera wasn't just fighting, they were studying. Every feint, every glance, they murmured. You're predictable, Fox. Sera's ears twitched. Then stop predicting this. She feigned a high strike, twisting at the last moment to slam her glaive into the cavern floor. The resulting resonance triggered a chain reaction in the cables above. Stalactites cracked and fell, forcing Vera to dodge. Jack seized the opening, landing a clean shot into Vera's shoulder. Vera hissed, staggering. Clever. Bleeding but unbroken, Vera triggered the cavern's failsafe. The entire chamber began to collapse, sections of the ceiling crashing down in deafening roars. "They're bringing the whole place down," Aya shouted over comms. Sera's eyes darted around, calculating. "Aya, redirect power to Corridor 6. Orin, cover exits. Jax?" "I'm staying with you," he said firmly. "No time to argue," she snapped. "Not arguing," he replied, stepping closer. "You're not doing this alone." Their eyes locked for a split second, words unspoken but understood. Then Sera surged forward, glaive blazing, as Vera charged to meet her. They clashed one last time amid falling stone and fire. Sera ducked under a strike, tail whipping for momentum, and drove her glaive through Vera's chest. The strategist froze, violet eyes wide. "You learned well." Sera held their gaze. "You taught me." She pulled the blade free, and Vera crumpled. "Go!" Jax shouted, grabbing her arm. They sprinted as the cavern collapsed behind them, the labyrinth tearing itself apart. Hours later, aboard their ship, the Foxfire Brigade sat in silence. Exhaustion clung to them like dust. Vera was dead. Arixa was rubble. The Horde had lost its strategist. But Sera didn't feel like celebrating. She stood at the viewport, gazing at the ruined moon below. Jax approached quietly, leaning against the frame beside her. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," she corrected. Her tail flicked gently, brushing his boot. He smiled faintly. "You saved millions, Sera. You're not a heretic. You're a hero." She shook her head. "I'm both. And that's fine." They stood in silence, the hum of the ship surrounding them. Finally, she glanced at him. "Thank you for not leaving me behind." "You'd have done the same," he said. She stepped closer, her amber eyes glowing softly. "Yes. Always." For the first time since the war began, Sera allowed herself to lean into him, resting her head against his shoulder. Jax's arm wrapped around her waist, steady and warm. Outside, the stars glimmered like foxfire in the dark. Months later, foxfire was no longer just a doctrine. It was a revolution. Humans, Vulpani, and even THRYX defectors trained side by side, their tactics blending tradition and innovation. The war wasn't over, but its rhythm had changed. The Horde no longer marched with certainty, now they moved with caution, whispers of the fox and her ghosts haunting every campaign. Sera stood on a balcony overlooking a training ground where recruits sparred in shifting holographic mazes. Aya barked orders, Orin quietly adjusted scopes, and Jax watched with his usual calm intensity. Sera's tail flicked proudly. "We're building something bigger than victory," she murmured. "Legacy," Jax said, stepping up beside her. She smiled faintly, her ears tilting toward him. "No. Hope." The wind carried the scent of rain, the sky glowing with sunset light that painted the recruits below in shades of fire. Foxfire. And for the first time, Sera felt the war tipping, not because of strength, but because of choice.